for our normal business development audience, I must admit, but all good.
Yeah, big warm welcome to everybody as always. Hope you're keeping well, and lovely to see you. And you know, Coffee Buddies goes from strength to strength. And today we're delighted. We've got Eddie Peace to come and talk to us. Now, I met Eddie. I don't know where. I met Eddie first in the British Library about 2 or 3 years ago when he was I think either in a competition as an entrepreneur or you were just starting a business. And
yeah.
You know, tell us your story, Eddie. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, sure. So I guess kind of loosely, I guess I've had a background in advanced analytics. So I did a physics degree at university. I then did a financial modelling job for a bit, and then I discovered this thing called machine learning and thought that sounded a lot more exciting. So went to UCL to do a master's in machine learning, and then off the back of that, founded a startup in the pharmaceutical world, which is how I met Tony. So it's basically a company which was using AI, machine learning to benchmark the outcome of clinical trials. And while it was very promising to start with, and we sort of partnered with a large pharma company, it didn't really work out in the end. Needless to say, it was nothing to do with Tony's advice, which was absolutely excellent at all times.
Well, thank you for that. But I mean, you're underneath it all, you're a maybe physicist, mathematician. Would you call that? Are you that? Is that your root basis?
Yes. Yeah. I definitely.
You've got a logical mind, and everything's very logical. We'll enter into the subject area in a minute. I think that's very relevant for the subject area, that somebody with a logical mind's interested in it. But I mean, back to you so you went through the ups and downs of an entrepreneur, did you?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how many people here have started businesses, but it's kind of feast or famine. You know, you have a particularly good call with a potential client, and then the next moment it's just, you know, it's a lot more difficult, and there's all sorts of issues with business partners I had, and lots of false dawns, and so definitely a lot of ups and downs, and meditation was certainly really helped me kind of put those in perspective, I guess, and not to get too kind of embroiled in particular situations, and try and look at things a bit more rationally.
Yeah, so tell us how a physicist entrepreneur became interested in what is sometimes described as the esoteric.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So I mean, I think I've always this is perhaps a bit of a strange habit of mine, but I've always loved reading what you might unkindly call self-help books, but I prefer to call self-improvement books. And so I read a lot of those, and most of the ones I read, this thing called meditation kept coming up. I thought, gosh, what is this? This sort of meditation can help you with your sleep, it can help you with less stress, it can help you with this, it can help you with that. And then eventually I thought, oh God, I need to understand more about what this actually is. And I started on an app which many of you might be familiar with, called Headspace, which was set up by someone who was a sort of Buddhist monk, I think, but originally came from the West. And it's a brilliant way to just get started in meditation, as in you can do sort of 2 minutes a day, going out to about 10 minutes a day, and it's sort of guided through, and it's very very clear what you're meant to be doing. And so I started doing that, and I just became fascinated by it. And the more I thought, I've got to read more about this. And so I read loads of books with, the science behind meditation, sort of made some sort of more Eastern philosophy books about Buddhism and stuff like that. And the more I learnt, the more interested I became. And so I guess sort of edited journey of mine through this sort of meditation world was I became more and more interested in it. I slowly began increasing the time I gave to meditation. So it started off with 2 minutes a day, then it was 10 minutes a day, then it was 20 minutes a day.
But if you put your physics worldview on it, or and you looked at it, what did you see meditation is?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. For me, it was a chance to. I guess it's, in a way, it's a sort of, scientists like doing experiments. I guess quite a glib way of putting it. And I think I see meditation as a sort of self-experiment, and it's sort of sort of experimenting on yourself in terms of learning more about yourself and how your different emotions and the way your mind works. Because essentially, I mean, I'll come on to talk about sort of what meditation actually is in a bit, but essentially you're sort of learning how your mind works. So I sort of saw it as a sort of way to do that, really.
Excellent. All right, my friend. Well, tell us more.
Yeah. Anyway, so just continuing my sort of journey through meditation. So I sort of pushed up the amount of time I spent on meditation every day, and I guess what people might be particularly interested in here is the sort of benefits. So one of the you know, because of devices like this, you know, everyone's attention span is gradually reducing, and so one of the immediate things I noticed was an increase in focus. So I could be a lot more focused, and that in turn made me a lot calmer because my attention wasn't constantly flitting around from thing to thing. But also, interestingly, it made me a lot more empathetic. So, you know, whereas in the past I was very, very bad at, you know, if I saw someone who's homeless on the street in London, I would, the vast majority of times, I'd just sort of walk past. And now I'm far, far more likely, of course I don't do it every time, but I'm far more likely to stop and ask how they are. Can I get you anything to eat? Something like that. When I did it more and more, one of the really other interesting things I noticed was a really interesting physiological effect, whereby I was wearing a Fitbit at the time, and to my shame, I wasn't doing any exercise at the time. But so I know this is completely due to the meditation, but my resting heart rate when I started meditating was about 65 beats a minute. And after, I can't quite remember how long it was, it'd gone down to 55 beats a minute, which I'm sure has lots of positive physical health effects. So that was particularly interesting. And I guess lastly, I noticed I was sleeping a lot better as well. So I sort of already, and of course, those experiencing that made me want to sort of go even further and learn more and more about it. So I guess that was the first wave of benefits. The second, as I kept on doing it more and more and more, is I noticed I was a lot more mindful in general. So to sort of put that in sort of in context. So what does that actually mean? So let's imagine you're cooking at home, and your wife, husband, partner comes back from work, and they've had a rubbish day at work, and they sort of snap at you because, and when you're eating, they snap at you because your food isn't good enough, or you know they don't like what you cooked. In the past, if you're not being very mindful, you'd say, "Gosh," you get really upset and angry. Why don't they like my food? You know, I thought it's quite good. If you're mindful, instead of naturally instinctively reacting in a kind of quite angry and an upset way, you can sort of almost think, actually, it's probably because they've had a bad day at work, and I'm not going to take it as personally. So that's one example in where being a bit more mindful can help. It's also meant I've had a lot better relationship with friends and family. So, you know, friends or family in the past who I've had maybe slightly difficult relationships with at times, that's got a lot better. I think you're almost, I guess the final thing actually is that I've noticed a drop in procrastination as well. So rather than sitting around procrastinating when there's a bit of work I don't want to do, I'm far more likely to just get it done. So in that sense, it's improved my productivity at work. And one of the sort of things I did recently, which most people might think you're absolutely mad, is I went on a silent 10-day meditation retreat, which I admit is a bit extreme, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. In that it's 10 days and you can't read, you can't write, you can't do anything, you can't make eye contact, physical contact, you can't speak to anyone. It's just you and your mind for 10 days, and it was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever done. And just, I guess, a story from that just to illustrate how what sort of things can happen when you do meditate. I remember I was there on the 6th day, and suddenly there was this huge feeling of restlessness rising up throughout my body, and it just kept it was like a being filled up. I felt as though I was just increasingly restless, and then suddenly a complete dam of emotion burst, and the whole of my abdomen was just filled with viscerally negative emotions. And this kind of went on for about a day. And then it wasn't associated with any particular thought or anything. But anyway, eventually it passed, and it felt as though something really unpleasant had been ripped out of my stomach. And that was the moment really that I started, the relationships with various friends and family members started to, it was a sort of, I think it was because my conscious mind was so calm, but there was stuff coming up from my unconscious mind that was either unhelpful or just wasn't very useful anymore, perhaps reactions you'd had in childhood to something. So that's might sound a bit sort of obscure, but that's kind of just illustrates perhaps some of the power of, you know, even though you're just sitting down, it sort of illustrates how interesting things can happen.
I mean,
I guess.
I suppose a couple, just my reactions are, one, I think I'm hearing you say you became a better metaphysical thinker. So in other words, you could distance yourself. And, you know, one of my questions to you, do you think if you do meditation, you're better at strategy because you can see the bigger picture?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can sort of, I think you're probably a clearer thinker, I think, because you're, when you're thinking of something really difficult, a difficult maybe strategy decision or difficult decision anyway, I think what it helps is being able to focus on it for an extended period of time. And I think because of smartphones and various distractions in life, it's increasingly hard. I mean, people's attention span is decreasing. So I think what meditation definitely helps with is thinking clearly, and that has had benefits in kind of life, but it's also definitely work as well in terms of more productive, you know, thinking about things more clearly, perhaps making slightly better decisions. But yeah, so I definitely think it can help with that.
Interesting. So tell us more.
Yeah, so I guess, so if I'd been listening to myself 3 years ago when I started meditating, I'd want to know what is actually meditation. And I think there's quite a lot of, I think people when they hear it, a lot of people when they think of meditation, they sort of think it sounds a bit like sort of mumbo jumbo and, you know, just sitting there and being yourself. And what does it actually mean? And what are you actually doing when you meditate? So what I'm going to try and do now is, I guess, put it into some sort of context and hopefully explain it in a sort of relatively scientific way, such that sort of hopefully it's clearer what meditation actually is and how it can help and how it perhaps leads to some of the benefits that I've experienced. So I guess Tony and I were actually chatting earlier. I like to think about meditation as a sort of, you know, if you thought 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's a very strange thing to go to the gym. Whereas now going to the gym is sort of completely thought of as normal, and it's thought of it's incredibly beneficial for your physical health. And I think, you know, a lot of people at the moment think perhaps what is meditation? And my hope is that in maybe 10, 20 years time, people see it as sort of going to a mental gym. So like going to a gym, you know, it only works effectively when you do it on a regular basis. So if you just went to the gym once a month, that wouldn't really make much of a difference, I guess. So I guess what is meditation? So to start with, I guess it's helpful to think, if there are any neuroscientists on the call, this is going to be a very high level description of how the brain works. But essentially, there are, the way I see it, there are three ways of your brain perceiving the world. So firstly, it's attention. So attention's like a spotlight. So it sort of focuses on the particular thing that your brain thinks is the most interesting at that moment in time. So be it, I don't know, if it's you're driving, it's perhaps the road ahead. If you're chatting to someone, it's the conversation. So that's one way of knowing the world. The second way is awareness. So awareness being sort of like a net cast wide. And so you can imagine, you know, you're sitting down, you're aware of lots of different sounds, but your brain doesn't choose to surface those to your attention because either it's, you know, it's a completely normal sound or some other reason. And the third thing is your sort of emotion network, I guess. So using neurotransmitters to create basic feelings like pleasure, fear, anger. And so to illustrate this, let's imagine you're sitting in a coffee shop and you're having a coffee with a friend. So your attention is probably focused on what your friend is actually saying. or hopefully anyway. But you're aware of lots of other things. So you're aware of, maybe the thing of heat from the coffee mug. You're aware of the traffic outside on the road. You're aware of, the hustle and bustle in the coffee shop, the noise of people chatting. But you're not focusing on them because there's nothing out of the ordinary, and it's what you'd expect. But let's imagine suddenly you would hear a really loud scream outside. Then your your awareness would be completely flagged. That's something really unusual. I better know what that is, and maybe it might trigger some emotion, sort of fear. Are they okay? And your attention would immediately divert to whatever that was to learn more about it. So I guess, so what is meditation after that? So I guess, well, firstly, I think modern life probably overemphasizes our emotion network and underemphasizes our attention. So what do I mean by that? So I guess, well, firstly, humans, I guess, when they evolved on the plains outside in Africa, if there was a stressful situation, it would be because you saw a bear and you ran away from the bear, and then the situation was less stressful. Now there are lots of stresses which continue. So if you've got a deadline at work, then that's a continuously, or family issues or whatever it might be, that's a stressful situation in which you're present the whole time. So I guess modern life tends to mean it's hard to sustain attention on things. So for example, your phone constantly is distracting you with notifications, and it's also underdeveloped our awareness. So I guess that example I gave about your partner coming back from work and being in a bad mood, without, if you were aware, you'd think, gosh, they've had a bad day at work, it's not personal. Whereas instinctively, or at least for me, a couple of years ago, it would have been your self-defense mechanism would have kicked in, and you'd been angry and upset with them. I guess the emotion would go straight to your prefrontal cortex and automatically drive your behavior. And I guess ultimately, if you can get trapped in that loop, then it can result in anxiety and depression, because these stressful stimuli are all around. If you don't learn to slightly take one step back, rather than getting embroiled in your emotions the whole time, it can be really, really unhelpful. So I guess, how does meditation help, and what is meditation? So meditation, the core part of meditation is, so you sit there or lie down, and you just focus on something which is very, very boring on the face of it, which is your breath. So it's usually your breath, and you focus on your breath, and then when your mind wanders off to something else, you bring it back to your breath. And that sounds like the most simple thing, but when you're off this call, just look at something which is not very interesting and try and sustain your attention on it, and I guarantee you your attention will wander after a few seconds. So what attention does, meditation is sort of like building a muscle. So you're building the muscle of attention. So so you can imagine how, if you're constantly training your brain to come back and focus on something, you're training your attention, which results in many of those benefits in terms of improved productivity, improved focus. So that's, I guess, one of the first benefits of meditation is it's training like a muscle your attention, so you can focus on things for longer. Following on from that, when your attention is more stabilized, your awareness, you're training your awareness as well. So, for example, when your attention becomes more stable, you can sort of, your mind, because when your mind's focusing on something which is relatively boring, something else in your mind pops up and says, hey, do you want to think about this instead? Your mind, you can sort of feel, the more and more you meditate, the more and more your awareness grows, you become all more aware of what's actually happening in your mind. So you can feel, it's a sort of meta, you can sort of feel thoughts and emotions coming through your mind a lot more, which means when you're, when a thought is about to grab away your attention or something comes up, you can say, no, I'm just going to focus on this. So you become far more aware of what's happening in your mind. And so going back to the example of your partner coming back from work, so if they sort of snap at you because they don't think your food's very nice or whatever it is, rather than instinctively reacting emotionally and becoming really upset or annoyed, you can sort of feel the emotion of, you become aware of the feeling of anger before you really kind of experience it. It's quite a sort of, I hope that makes sense, but essentially you sort of feel yourself becoming angry, and then you almost have a choice about whether to react to it or not. Whereas if you're a lot less aware of your emotions, you just instinctively react and get very, very annoyed. So meditation essentially trains two skills. It both trains the attention, so building that up like a muscle, being able to focus for longer periods of time, and you become more and more aware the more you meditate, such that you can feel what's happening in your, you can sort of feel what's happening in your brain more and more and more, which means you can react more proportionately to situations that come up in life. So, and I guess I luckily have never gone through any sort of serious mental health issues, but you know, for something like depression or anxiety, it just becomes, you can sort of almost take a step back, as Tony mentioned. It becomes a bit less personal, and you can sort of, rather than
I suppose that listening to you, Eddie, I mean, there is this new qualification you can get called mental health first aider, which I think is intriguing. I'd like to do the course myself, but it sort of, I suppose, you know, the question is that what we're not worried. Well, we are worried about mental health, but we're also worried about if you go in and see your boss and you've got your boss's head in front of you. We're worried about what's going on in his head. You know, how many random thoughts are going on. So there's also this idea of, you know, how can we help people to accept this so that they're tuned in better to work, really?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
So that, I suppose, is the question to you as an advocate. How do we mainstream it? How do we advocacy it so that it's not neutralized by those who think it's woo-woo?
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, believe me, I would have thought it was, it sounded, you know, when as I said before, you know, I would have thought it sounded pretty, being very, very skeptical of the benefits of meditation. But I guess in terms of sort of proving that, I guess it's not woo-woo, as you say, there's actually there's a fantastic book which I'd highly recommend, because I would have been very skeptical listening to myself, you know, three years ago, called The Science of Meditation, and it's written by someone called Daniel Goleman, who I think popularized the term emotional intelligence, and a professor of psychology called Richard Davidson. And it looked at how, because of neuroplasticity, meditation can literally change how the brain works. In very gradual ways and over time, but change how the brain works. So one of the, I guess, to try and make it more concrete in terms of what actually happens. So one of the findings from this, one of the studies is that so your amygdala, which I think is located at the front of your brain, after only 30 hours of meditation, that I think the amygdala's involved in your sort of stress circuitry of the brain. That reduces, so reduce stress. There's also sort of, you can quieten your sort of, I think it's called the default mode network, in terms of just general, your brain is constantly jumping from thing to thing to thing, in terms of worrying about work and worrying about this and worrying about that. So that quietens down as well, and means that your mind is much less likely to hijack your attention at any one time. In terms of how to sort of to spread the word about this, I mean, I very much hope talks like this can help. And I think quite often meditation is seen as kind of, gosh, that's a bit Eastern, and you know, we in the West are advanced and we don't need to worry about any of that stuff. And I think quite a lot of it is taking it out of that context in which it was developed, and putting it into a more scientific context and saying, well, how does this actually help? And how does this actually help your brain? And what's actually going on here? And then, of course, hearing firsthand from people for whom it has benefited. But I have noticed a step change actually over the last 3 years. 3 years ago, people would sort of laugh at the idea about going on a meditation retreat and think, oh, why do you do that? And that's a bit weird. And now I've noticed people are increasingly interested about it. And rather than kind of, oh, I don't know about that. They're more curious. They're saying, well, tell me more about that. I'd like to hear about it. So I think probably that's already happening, Tony, to a large extent, which is obviously a very, very positive thing.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Anything else, my friend? Because I really think this is intriguing. That's why I'm so quiet.
Yeah. Well, I guess I always like it can be quite a hard thing to grasp, I think, meditation, and so I always like explaining it with regard to an analogy. So hopefully it'll sort of explain mean you picture the benefits of it more concretely. So if you don't meditate at all, you're sort of like a puddle of water, and that one splash or a life event which goes wrong can cause a lot of ripples that can really rile you up. The more and more you meditate, the deeper that pool becomes, such that even if there's on the surface it's all choppy, deep down there's a sort of calmness. And so meditation sort of feels like that. But I was saying you become more and more remote. You can look at your emotions more objectively. So the deeper and deeper and deeper that pool becomes. And so even when tricky situations, stressful situations, very tough situations are going on in life, you've got that deep reservoir of calm. So that's sort of what meditation feels like, as a sort of analogy. And the other analogy, which is more with regard to meditation, is sort of like it's like a never-ending journey, and it's like a journey of discovery almost. And I read a book once that said, meditation at the end of the day is sort of exploring your mind and how your mind works and how your mind can work better. And I've heard it's like a sort of going through a series of valleys. Each one is more amazing than the next.
Goodness, that is awesome, my dear friend Eddie. Awesome. I think I'd like to thank you. I mean, I think we're going to move to questions now, because I don't know whether Graham, are you still there?
I am still here. I was meditating. I mean, I think it's. I've been focusing on Eddie, and I've been like, my mind's been like, in just complete focus. So I think already I'm kind of there, and I'm certainly going to be looking into it following that talk. But I think Dom would like to say something first of all. Yeah, if you go for it, Dom.
Yeah, well, thanks, Eddie. Anything that might help me procrastinate less and focus more is probably a good thing. My first question probably is, does it work on children? I think to get children to focus more would be good. But no, I'm kind of just interested in the... I had a housemaster years and years ago who used to be able to kind of almost blank his mind, and you'd see him just kind of nod off for about 30 seconds, and he was almost dead. And he would then light up again, and he would then be able to function for another 8 hours. And that was he was able to kind of completely kind of empty his... He's a very busy man, but he would empty his mind when he wanted to, and that would kind of renew him. And I always thought that was just the key to productivity, and it wouldn't be amazing to do that. But no, my question was really around, do you think that we are living in a more secular world? The concept of religion and kind of spirituality and being in touch with the other, if that makes sense, seems to be disappearing from most kind of Western countries. And I'm just wondering if you think there is an innate need, whether it's recognized or not, for people to be in touch with that more kind of spiritual side, and whether or not this is what people are turning to replace that kind of previous indoctrination or whatever.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I guess meditation as a whole came from a religion, although it says Buddhism, which is a slightly strange religion in that it doesn't really believe in a god. So I think it's the only religion that doesn't. But I think there are probably two ways of seeing meditation. You could see it as a sort of pseudo-religious sort of thing, or you can view it as a tool to relieve stress, sleep better, all the things that I mentioned. I think definitely does help connect you with the other, as you put it. I think one of the things I've noticed is that I became more sort of spiritual. I mean that in a kind of, I mean, I'm a Christian, but it does not necessarily in that way. So I think it probably does do that in terms of, I'm not, I guess, it does make your life, I guess, slightly more, people like sort of purpose and meaning in their lives. Some people find that purpose through work, others through religion, others through a whole variety of things. And I think it definitely can help find that purpose, but not necessarily. It can just be a really useful tool. So yeah, no, it's an interesting question, but potentially it can, depending on how you use it.
Interesting. Next one.
Yes, I've been nodding off again. I know it's it's an interesting question from Tom. Actually, Tom, if you could give your question to Eddie.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. As a card-carrying neuroscientist and who's been involved in developing antidepressants over decades, I've followed closely over the years, meditation and how meditation may affect gene function.
Yep. And
we know from eating foods, for example, which can turn on and switch off genes. So a lot of the physiological responses, you're describing through actions on the amygdala, which are two almond-shaped areas in the brain, in the limbic system, which are extremely important for emotion. And they're, regarded as the sentinel areas of the brain with regard to emotion, awareness, attention, etc. So to get to my question, which is, if you'd started meditation earlier, do you think you would have made a better job of your startup company?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And firstly, Tom, I hope you weren't too appalled by my scientific explanation of how meditation works.
No, not at all. I'm, certainly, the emotional intelligence, books you quoted and that, are extremely powerful. And, as a physicist, I would have hoped you would have dug and delved into the sort of physical and biochemical aspects of this.
Yeah. No, but to answer your question, I think possibly, I mean, it might have made me sort of more productive and say, but I think perhaps the, I guess, at the end of the day, startups are incredibly uncertain and, have a lot of ups and downs, as we talked about at the start. And I think maybe one thing meditation definitely helped with is when the whole, for various different reasons, things didn't work out. I think that would have hit me quite hard, having expended so much effort to it, and there's the opportunity cost, of course, of not earning a salary. And I was paying myself a bit, but not what I could have got paid. I think when it did all fall apart, meditation really, really helped me kind of be more equanimous about it and sort of level-headed and think, well, I gave it a shot. The world isn't being vindictive towards me. It didn't work out. So I think my meditation really, really helped there, and I was able to just sort of think, oh well, that didn't work out, even though I was obviously very disappointed it didn't, but not to take it so personally. So I think that was probably the main benefit, but it might have had benefits on the margin of being more focused and productive and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was interested in your comment with regard to the, handling certain people.
Yeah.
As you went along, and I would have thought, that the meditation skills which you've learned now, would have been very powerful then.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah. I think it sort of depends. I'm not quite sure. It's definitely helps when dealing with people who are not very happy with you, say, to try and see it a bit more in context. And apparently the more and more you meditate, the better you become at being more attuned to people's kind of what people are thinking and people's emotions. So I guess it might have helped in that regard, but I don't think it would have. I think there were. I'm sorry to say there were lots of other issues with the company as it was. So I think although it did start okay. So I'd like to think that was the main reason it went wrong. But I think there are other issues.
The other thing is that in a way, I think all of us, we live in quite a transactional, agitated world where people are always telling you, when are you going to get the data, who's doing what, and I suppose the question, Eddie, is meditation the antidote to that sort of quite aggressive world which we all live in, because people, as I say, they want you to do something in 5 seconds. Or maybe I'm living in an aggressive world and you all live in a very tranquil world.
No. I mean, it's the great acceleration, isn't it? Like everyone wants everything, yesterday, and so I very much agree that meditation can help with that.
And it's a rattling. The world rattles, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Sue's got a question. It kind of leads on from that. I love this question actually. So. Go for it, Sue.
Oh, thank you, Eddie. I came along to learn stuff, and I am learning. But you spoke of stress as being something. My takeaway, something we need to treat.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I love stress. So, how does that fit with meditation? Does that take all the excitement out of our lives?
Yeah. So I think. I think stress can be positive for sure, but I think continued stress is probably quite negative. I think, I guess I'd emphasize it sort of all this sort of stuff takes practice, and all the benefits which I've talked about need to be, it's not sort of you sit down after a week you experience absolutely no stress at all. I mean, I've meditated for 3 years and there are still times which I feel very stressed, but I guess what's unhelpful is when that stress spills out into other things. So stress might be quite helpful to meet an immediate work deadline, but if you're feeling constantly stressed because of family or friends, or you're constantly stressed because of work, that I think all the studies show that can be quite unhelpful. And I guess you certainly do. I think your last part of your question was, do you lose feeling or something like that, or do you?
Yes.
So definitely not. I just think it's and life doesn't become any less rich because you're. I guess the implication to your question was quite dystopian in a way, and that if you meditate, do you sort of lose all feeling, and does life lose its purpose? Whereas, and I'm only at the very start of my meditation journey, but if anything, I think it's probably the reverse, as in life becomes much more richer. It's just you can respond more appropriately to situations in life, and you speak to people who have meditated for a very, very long time, and they say life has more meaning than ever and is all the richer for it. So that's a positive, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll move on to Ross's question. Then I've got a question afterwards. So.
Okay. Thanks, Eddie. I found it really interesting. Actually, I've never really explored or had meditation explained to me. A couple of things. It feeds off from what Tony just said. Both questions are probably quite crude. Quite often in companies, again, just like Tony was saying, it's all about getting things done, making changes, convincing people to do stuff. In some ways, a very aggressive kind of culture in many, many companies. And if you do kind of adopt meditation and you become, I guess, more self-aware, and everybody loves the benefits you reeled off were marvelous, about sleeping better, about your heart rate going down, about being able to, all that stuff. Is there a risk that sort of makes you kind of not really fit into the culture of that company, perhaps, if it is a particularly aggressive one? That's the first little question. And the second one, even more crude, this is a sort of an 80-20 rule around meditation. How much time do you think you should spend, and I know everyone's different, to to start to get benefit. You know, ideally you'd like to spend, I don't know, a couple of hours doing it every day, but most people don't have that. So, you know, is there a 20% of time that gives you a good, you know, start and good base for adopting a more, you know, meditative approach to life? Thanks, Eddie.
So a couple of very interesting questions there, Ross. I guess on the first one, not something I've actually ever really considered before, and I've got to say I've never worked in a company with that culture before. I'd like to think I didn't engender that culture in my startup, but you know, others might disagree. I don't know, potentially. I just think, but maybe not. I think you just become better at. So let's say it's a very aggressive culture, and your boss quite often sort of has sharp words with you. I think one thing meditation certainly can help with is taking it less personally. So if your boss starts shouting at you, rather than thinking, "What have I done wrong? I'm inadequate. I'm not good enough," you sort of more think, "Gosh, my boss must be having a tricky day," or something like that. So it can probably help put situations in perspective. I mean, I think it's pretty hard for me to comment because I don't know. I don't really know. I've never worked in that sort of environment before, especially seeing how meditate. So I can't offer a definite answer there. Maybe Tony might be able to.
I think one of the things is when you know, subjects like meditation, when you in a way you become a slightly less resilient because you're in a way you're calm, and then you go into a room and it's full of agitated people who won't talk to you unless you deliver your antibody in a few moments. It's very hard to. It's hard to. I mean, you might be able to be, I think, as Eddie said, a little bit more forgiving, but I think there is a sense that you probably, I'm sure you think, Eddie, why don't you go and start meditating, man or woman? Because you're giving me so much grief, which is irrelevant, you know?
Yeah. And Ross, into the second part of your question.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know. I think there is actually. This probably brings me on to, you know, the how to start question. You know, what's the best way if you're convinced of the benefits and want to get going? You know, what do you do to get started? So, I mean, Headspace is a great place to start. Calm, Insight Timer. There are these apps which kind of a great place to get started. You know, where you start on 2 minutes a day. I mean, everyone can spare 2 minutes every day, and you can gradually sort of build up from there. I now do. So you can start by what's called a guided session, and I'd recommend that to start with when there's a voice saying, you know, concentrate on your breath and, you know, all that sort of stuff. It sort of walks you through it. Unfortunately, I don't think there is a. Other thing I'll say, when you do start, the absolute key is consistency. It's far better to do 5 minutes every day than half an hour every week. So the absolute key is to build a habit around it and to make it consistent, because only then do the benefits start coming. But is there an 80-20 rule? In my experience, there isn't, unfortunately. So I think what's probably more important is that you're training the right skills at the right time. So when you start, you might want to focus on a particular aspect. You know, the more and more advanced you get, you might want to focus on other aspects. So there's a great book called The Mind Illuminated, which is essentially a really, really detailed manual. It's kind of almost like you've got a personal coach there. Whenever you're having a difficulty, you flick it open and you're like, oh, I need to focus more on that.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's honestly, if you go on Amazon and look up The Mind Illuminated, it is the amount of 5-star reviews it's got is ridiculous. You know, people saying I'd meditated for years and then I discovered this book and I started to make a lot more progress a lot more quickly. So it's less about 80-20, it's more about kind of focusing on the right things at the right time, because you know, as I said in the spiel, you know, firstly you're focusing on your attention and then you focus more on developing your awareness, and so there are different skills you need to work on at different times.
Great. Thanks, Eddie. Really good.
Just
Yeah,
ordered
no-
the book, Ed. I've just ordered the book, Eddie.
Have you? Oh, brilliant.
That's brilliant.
It will be in my Kindle before, but here I am agitated, aren't I? Because I want to get it quick, and that's not really very zen. Graham,
I'm going to actually steal a question from my flatmate Kevin, because meditation is seen as a little bit hippie and what have you. The question hopefully doesn't sound too flippant, but does it make you more socialist?
I think see that wasn't a question I was expecting today. Throwing me a curveball there. I think probably I don't know about more socialist, but I can see why you might say you become sort of more, I guess, compassionate, and I guess I don't think you become less materialistic, because you don't act on all your wants and impulses are a lot less. So I guess traditionally those have been associated more with sort of left wing than right wing. But I guess are
you still a capitalist at heart? That's the thing.
Yeah, well, I think there are certainly some people who do meditation who sort of want to rip up capitalism and stuff like that. But I don't think that certainly hasn't happened to me, put it that way. But I can see. I guess if you're more on the right, more attached to sort of the idea of freedom and stuff, which I don't think is really necessarily impacted too much by meditation. So it definitely makes you less materialistic, and therefore helps save you a bit of cash as well. And it definitely makes you more compassionate. But for me, anyway, it hasn't meant I've become more left wing.
I think capitalism could do with some compassion, actually. So if the two came together, that might be quite good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
we got a question from Meg.
Meg, would you like to ask a question? That's it.
Thanks. Thank you for that great talk. I'm definitely going to look into the books as well. It sounds really great. It's something I need to do. My question is more of a follow-on from Ross's question about, do you think that if all employers encouraged their employees to take a time out of their day to do practice meditation, that employers would actually see a benefit to this across the whole of their teams?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I definitely think that. But I guess all the benefits I've talked about, as you sort of point out, are on quite a sort of personal level. But that can clearly have impacts to the company. And I know an increasing number of companies are organising sort of meditation minutes and stuff like that. Actually, the company I now work for, they organise a meditation every morning. There's a 15-minute meditation session, which apparently isn't hugely well attended. So we still need to spread the word. But yeah, I think probably, undoubtedly, personal benefits can sort of filter out on a company-wide basis. I mean, if everyone meditates and everyone can become slightly more focused, then that probably makes people more productive. It's also, there's just the other thing which I perhaps didn't mention in my talk, is that it just leads to a sort of general better sense of well-being and happiness, and your sort of general happiness, your base level of happiness sort of seems to go up. So, and I think there are loads of studies which suggest that sort of happier people and happier employees make more productive and employees as well. So I'm absolutely convinced it can have a knock-on benefit. And you see apps like Headspace and Calm are increasingly trying to sort of sell company-wide subscriptions to people. So I know Headspace is sort of signed on with quite a lot of big companies. So it's definitely happening, and I think it's definitely, whereas in the past people might have seen it as a sort of mumbo jumbo, maybe companies are realizing that it can actually be helpful.
Fantastic. Graham, are we coming to the end?
We are coming to the end. It's been a fantastic talk.
So can I just thank Eddie from everybody around the table? That was awesome. Maybe we'll come back again, Eddie, because I think I think it's really, really, really good what you're doing, and I think the more we can encourage these sort of approaches, we've got to be better, haven't we? We've got to be better.
I just to say guys one final thing, which is that to start, the book I suggest is absolutely fantastic, but it is a sort of a kind of this thick manual. So if you're just starting, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's really interesting because it's written by someone who is a neuroscience PhD, but also a Buddhist monk. So he sees things from both perspectives. I mean, it is just read the Amazon reviews and you sort of be blown away. But my point, I guess my point is that it's quite. It might, if it comes through the post, it might seem quite intimidating. So perhaps you know, the sort of easy way to get yourself eased in is to start on something like Headspace or Calm or Insight Timer, and then maybe and get into a regular routine. The key thing, and then maybe order that book and then you'll be less intimidated by it.
It would definitely be ironic, wouldn't it, if the postman came along and you've got your meditation book, pops through and kills the cat.
Yeah.
So on that note, we've got Eddie's blog article. If you don't mind, Eddie, we'll post it on our in our community app, and also this video will go in so that there's more information. For Coffee Buddies, what we've got next week, Graham?
Very good question. Well, we got on Tuesday a link up with On Helix. We've got a fringe event with On Helix. Really exciting stuff. And it's creative excitement versus creative experience. We talked a little bit about it at the beginning. So that's definitely one to watch. If you're going to On Helix anyway, you get it for free. If not, you can buy it the normal way. So that's going to be really good fun. And yeah, we're going on. We've got the Getting to Know You tomorrow.
But we've also got Cell and Gene Therapy next
and then
week.
we got the Cell and Gene Therapy on Wednesday. Yeah, so that's we've got a really interesting CEO, Galvin. What was his name? Jeff Galvin. He's the CEO of American Gene Technology. He's going to be talking about the ambition of the of Cell and Gene Therapies, and then we have Chris Van, don't we? The COO of Autolus. Also speaking.
We're going to get like a TED talk from our friend from, what's he called again?
Oh, it's Jeff Galvin. Yeah, that's right.
Our friend Jeff is going to give like a TED talk, and then we're going to have an after TED talk discussion, bringing in Chris Van, who's the COO of Autolus, which is an awesome company, which has been designated by Syncona and others as something to build. So we look forward to seeing you next time. And thanks again, Eddie. That was awesome. Be careful and bye for now.
Okay, thanks a lot, Eddie. That was brilliant. I really loved it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Cheers, bye.